here's my honest review of the Bose QuietComfort Ultra 2nd Gen with comparisons against the previous 1st generation and most of its direct competitors, including the AirPods Max, Sony XM6, Bose and Wilkins Px7 S3, and more. Hey there, if you're new to recordingnow.com, we purchase every single product we review on a mission to build the largest database of honest headphone and wireless earbud reviews, detailed head-to-head comparisons, and overall rankings to help you make a more informed purchase. I use my background in pro audio to create custom EQ settings for all of these headphones, including the QC Ultra 1st and 2nd Gen, to get the most sound quality potential out of them. To access that, visit the full blog post in the video description and in the pinned comment below, or visit recordingnow.com. Scroll down to the sound quality section, or use the chat bot in the bottom right to type in the model name plus EQ. Alright, so the Bose QuietComfort Ultra 2nd Gen. This is a much anticipated update to the previously excellent all-rounder, the 1st Gen. And in this video, I'm going to answer the question of whether you should upgrade if you own the 1st Gen or which one to get in 2025. So starting with comfort, the Ultra 2 actually weighed in 8 grams heavier than the previous Gen 1 at 262 grams. That said, the design is pretty identical to the 1st Gen. The only difference that I see cosmetically is that the hinges are this shinier finish versus the more satin or matte finish of the original. When I feel the headband and ear pad cushions, they feel pretty identical. And the interior ear cup space, which is really nice by the way, compared to something like the Sony XM6 that is very shallow and my ears are pressing against the fabric in here. My ears are nice and free inside of these ear cups on both the QC Ultra 1 and 2. So overall for comfort, nothing has been changed. This is a perfect 5 out of 5 for comfort. Super lightweight compared to something like the AirPods Max at 387 grams. That's over 120 grams heavier than the QC Ultra, which you surely feel back to back. All right, so moving on to features, build quality, battery life, and noise canceling performance, which will combine into a single score. Now, look at these two headphones. It's easy to think because they have an identical design, all they did was change the finish on the headband and on the hinges. But when you actually spend time with the QC Ultra 2 and you look deeper, there's actually a bunch of nice quality of life improvements. So let's start by talking about Bluetooth 5.4 versus 5.3. I never had any multi-point connectivity issues with Gen 1, so it's nice to see that they've upgraded the Bluetooth once again, and if there's any issues, they can always do firmware updates, which I've done a number of those on both the Bose headphones and the Bose QC Ultra earbuds as well. Now, one cool feature that is new for the Ultra 2 is the new cinema mode to match up with something like the Sony XM6's very excellent cinema mode. And in addition to that, there is the immersive audio, which is really Bose's spatial audio, just like Gen 1, where you can have the head tracked or the still or turn it off completely, which I typically do. Another new feature for the QC Ultra 2 is we now have lossless listening via USB-C wired connection. This is something similar to the AirPods Max USB-C version. Now, moving on to battery life, this has been nicely improved to 30 hours versus the previous 24 hours on Gen 1. So 6 more hours on a single charge is a nice welcome improvement. Now for build quality, again, identical design. So the build quality on the QC Ultras, I would say is about average to slightly above average. What I do like about these headphones is they are using metal clearly here in the headband and in the hinges. For being so lightweight, they do feel fairly durable, especially compared to something like the Sony XM6 that just feels like plastic all around. What I don't like about the QC Ultras is they use a ton of plastic here for the ear cup and for the exterior of the headband, so they actually feel a little cheaper than the price suggests. Something like the AirPods Max does look and feel more premium. Now, moving on to the noise canceling performance, which I know a lot of you are highly interested. What's the difference between Gen 1 and Gen 2? So upon initial listening, I actually found the noise canceling to be pretty much the same as the Gen 1. But as I spent more time with the Gen 2, I would say that the biggest caveat to Gen 1 is that there were some side effects to this noise canceling, namely a little bit of hiss or white noise, and when you're moving around or walking around, there was this slight bumping side effect at times due to the noise canceling. I would say that these things have been improved with the new 2nd Gen. I just used these for a workout yesterday and I noticed that they seem to be more consistent with the noise canceling effectiveness and the lack of side effects. Overall for noise canceling, I found that the QC Ultra to be one of the best in the class. I do think something like the AirPods Max is really competitive here, perhaps even slightly more effective. So in the past, the AirPods Max that I've shown in reviews is the original Lightning version, but for some reason this new USB-C version version. I don't know if it's due to unit versus unit quality control or a different firmware, but the noise canceling is very strong and effective, arguably the best I have tested with this AirPods Max. And aside from the Bose QC Ultra and the AirPods Max, I do think that the Sony XM6 and the Sonos Ace after the firmware update are the best noise canceling headphones in the market right now. I do find the Sony XM6 to be slightly more consistent as far as having even less of those side effects I had mentioned. But overall, when it comes to noise canceling, Bose is one of the best in the world. I don't think you can go wrong with any of these options right now if noise canceling is one of your top priorities. So overall, for features, battery life, build quality, noise canceling performance, I give the Bose QC Ultra 2nd Gen a perfect 5 out of 5. I had given the Gen 1 a 5 out of 5 due to having one of the best noise canceling, but I may have to slightly alter the score to a 4.5 now that the 2nd Gen is improved in every single way, including that battery life and noise canceling performance. All right, so let's move on to sound quality, which is the other factor that I know a lot of you are interested in. So just to give some quick context about Gen 1, if you're new to the channel or you haven't seen my review or heard me talk about Gen 1, this is actually one of my more favorable headphones to listen to, but there's a very important caveat, which is you must apply EQ in order to get the max sound quality out of these. I still remember my first listening impression of the Gen 1. I noted that they were very bass heavy that completely drowned out the mids and the treble, and I almost couldn't listen to them even after just a few minutes. But after tinkering around with the EQ, I was able to uncover some beautiful mids and treble detail that was hiding under that very bloated and overpowering bass and sub bass. Now, moving on to the 2nd Gen, I immediately noticed a much more pleasing tuning and sound profile right out of the box. These were so much more enjoyable to listen to versus the stock Gen 1. What jumps out to me about the QC Ultra 2 is just having a more balanced tuning and tonality that really focuses on excellent mids, and it's very vocal forward and detailed. That's simply something that you couldn't say about Gen 1. Now, Gen 1 after EQ compared to 2nd Gen, even completely stock, I noticed that the QC Ultra 2 is able to have everything across the frequency range from bass, mids, and treble, and it's all able to play nicely with each other. Whereas with Gen 1, I pretty much have to subdue the bass in order to make room for the mids and the treble, leading to a very detailed, but a sound that is a little bit thin and lacking definitely in the low end. So the biggest improvement to me is actually the bass on the 2nd Gen. It's much bigger and cleaner while still being able to handle and deliver some beautiful detail in the mids and treble. Now, applying some EQ to the QC Ultra 2 is able to make them even more enjoyable to listen to. My V1 that's on the website right now is geared towards pop and hip hop, and it's made to emphasize that bass even more. So I would say that's the biggest difference between the 1st Gen, is this is more of a bass heavy and fun headphone in a good way, while still retaining that beautiful mid and treble detail that the original 1st Gen had. Now, overall, I'm hearing slightly more resolution details and just a fuller sound compared to Gen 1, which sounds a little bit more compressed now when I listen back to back. The one thing I like about the QC Ultra headphones is they have pretty good sound stage for being wireless closed back headphones. A lot of these headphones tend to sound compressed, but these are some of the more open sounding headphones for the class. Now, just to draw a line in the sand, where does the QC Ultra 2 fit in the grand scheme of things? Personally, I find the QC Ultra 2 to be more enjoyable for music listening than the Sony XM6. The Bowers & Wilkins Px7 S3 is very interesting here because I just reviewed the Px8 S2, which I actually have right here. Now, this is clearly in a level above the QC Ultra 2, but I'd also say above the Px7 as well. But what's interesting is listening to these back to back, I actually spent a little more time to create a new EQ to get the Px7 a little closer to the Px8, which I'm pretty happy with. But the QC Ultra 2 is surprisingly competent here. That said, after dialing in EQ for the Px7 to get the most out of it, I will say that the QC Ultra 2 is slightly below the Px7 S3, which just excels more for those audiophile technicalities. And then one other headphone I've mentioned a lot on this channel is the Cambridge Audio P100, which I believe is also in a slightly level above the Px7 and and above the QC Ultra 2 as well. This really competes more with the high end of the class like the Focal Batiste and even a little bit of the Px8 S2. I find the QC Ultra 2 and something like the AirPods Max to be about equally enjoyable, but I think because of that EQ that is very effective for the Bose and it takes EQ fairly well, you're able to have more versatility for the sound overall. And I find the bass to just be very pleasing to listen to, actually even more pleasing than the bass on the Px7 S3 and the P100. So that's really the strength of these headphones, is they're very enjoyable to listen to, especially if it's more consumer friendly and casual listening. So overall, I give the Bose QC Ultra 2 a 9.1 out of 10. This is a nice improvement over the first gen. Alright, so moving on to value and answering the question, should you upgrade from Gen 1 to Gen 2? So these currently retail at $449 USD. That is about the same price as the Gen 1 was before, but really interestingly, the Gen 1 actually used to cost closer to $429 and then on sale for as low as $349. But essentially, the price didn't really go up that much compared to Gen 1. And I have to say, if we think about the overall package, having that perfect comfort, having one of the best noise canceling in the class, having sound quality that is very good and enjoyable, it is really hard to have all of those categories and to have very little to no weaknesses. So if you don't own the Gen 1, I will say absolutely, if you can afford it, go for the Gen 2 because it's simply better than the Gen 1 in every single way. Now, things get trickier if you have the first gen QC Ultra. I will say that Gen 1 is still about 90% the same headphone. I mean, visually speaking, they pretty much are identical, but when it comes down to that noise canceling performance, comfort, and sound quality, the Gen 1 is really not that far behind at all. It's really just minor improvements when it comes to the features, like that new battery life is a welcome improvement. The slightly better noise canceling, I think, will make a decent improvement. The sound quality has been nicely improved, especially if you're someone who loves bass and sub bass. So what we're doing is taking a headphone that was already one of our best all-arounders for the class of wireless noise canceling headphones and simply making it better in pretty much every single way. So overall for value, I give the QC Ultra 2 a 4.0 out of 5. I think it does make a case for 4.5 due to the fact that it has no weaknesses, honestly. The sound quality is starting to get to a place where it's competing with headphones like the Px7 S3, which is pretty much just for its sound quality. And when you listen to these two back to back, honestly, the enjoyment of music listening is not that far behind at all, while having better comfort, better noise canceling. So tallying up all the scores, overall, the Bose QC Ultra 2 receives a 9.2 out of 10. Now, it's a very high 9.2, it's almost 9.3. The previous gen also received a 9.2 overall, but we might have to adjust some scores there and drop it down a little bit. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment below letting us know. If you have any questions about the QC Ultra 2 versus any of these other headphones or any of the headphones on the website, make sure to leave a comment below. I try to get back to as many people as possible. If you want to help support the channel further, because it does cost a lot of money to purchase all of these headphones brand new, consider using our affiliate links in the video description or in the pinned comment below for your next Amazon purchase. And if you love audio and music as much as we do, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we have a ton more content left to go this year. There are new models like the Sennheiser HDB630 that just got announced, so we definitely plan to have more reviews and comparisons coming soon. If you want to keep watching, I'm going to link a relevant video and playlist here so you can make a more informed purchase.